Somerville residents have heard and felt the impact of increased air traffic over the city for the last decade. Runway realignments and increased traffic at Logan Airport have combined to bring more departing flights across the city. Almost 200 community activists and concerned residents recently attended Airport Impacts 101. The day-long conference featured leading researchers in the areas of aircraft noise and aircraft pollution to increase the public's understanding of what the most recent studies are showing about the health effects of increased exposure to air traffic.
We thought that having a dialogue between the scientists and the community members would start to broaden the community members' footing with regard to airport impacts, how serious some of them might be, the progress that's starting to be made that's pretty impressive in the science world with regard to aviation impact.
In Somerville, we've seen an exponential increase in airport traffic with the reconfiguration of air traffic patterns, and as well as compounded by the increase of airport traffic in general, as Logan Airport has increased its commercial and passenger flight business, and so that those two variables have compounded the impacts over the past decade plus here in our community.
So effectively, the number of jets and sometimes other planes, but almost predominantly jets, coming from Logan tripled that are flying over Somerville. That was noticed immediately. It had been feared before the opening of that runway, and it in fact came to pass.
When we look at the relationship between sound and health, we have to think about sound as being an experience. And it is that experience that brings about any negative health. So while I feel like, we capture the sound pressure level, there are some things that we fail to capture that I think are important in modifying and mediating the negative health effects. So in particular, I feel like there's a pathway, and I feel like we need to capture that whole experience before we can actually talk about the relationship between sound and health. In my dissertation work, I am specifically interested in the frequency component of sound, because we know that we have the sound level, but sound feels different. Different sounds actually feel different. And I'm very interested in that feeling because I'm very interested in the experience of sound.
Every morning, every day, even in the late evenings, the amount of air traffic is just mind-blowing that comes over our community, over the Mystic River and our surrounding communities, and the consequential noise as a result of the thrust of the planes taking off from Logan, can be felt firsthand. You can actually feel your house shaking in many cases, and that has a negative impact on our ability to enjoy, really feel and absorb the quiet enjoyment of our homes with our families, with our neighbors. So we experience that every day here as a family here in Somerville.
It's not as though people are perfectly able to hear sounds of all frequencies equally well, and it's even more complicated than that, because even though you can't hear the low frequencies, your house can, and it can rattle and wiggle and create nonlinear effects that you think you might hear an airplane going by, but your window just feels like rattling anyway.
There's a very high subjective difference in people on the ground, and so the airport noise impacts, as far as annoyance, are felt very much further from the airport than you might imagine. At the same time, air pollution is known to be a serious driver of public health outcomes, especially cardiovascular outcomes, which are about 40% of all mortality. They're the largest single category of health impact generally. They're directly connected to air pollution, and increasingly people are looking at cardiovascular outcomes for noise pollution as well.
What can noise do to you sort of immediately? And there are things up there like sleep disturbance, like annoyance, things that can contribute to stress. And I think everyone probably finds that pretty intuitive. You're exposed to noise, it wakes you up in the middle of the night. That is not a good thing. You get stressed out, you get annoyed. So that's, I think, a pretty well established set of literature and pretty intuitive. The bottom half is a whole separate set of literature that's out there, different researchers, different investigators saying If you are more stressed out, if you have disturbed sleep, these things can contribute to high blood pressure or hypertension, and this puts you on the pathway to cardiovascular effects.
Noise is the most concentrated of these three impacts. It's the one that's happening at the localest of scales. So when we divide that by the number of people who are bearing that cost, the per person cost of noise can exceed the costs of air quality and climate.
We cannot just say nothing over my city, nothing over my town. We have to play a very critical role and collaborative role in determining how that burden gets distributed.
Every time you change the runway patterns, there is a new population affected, and it's the new population from whom the largest number of complaints come. So there becomes a question of, are we going to try to figure out how to distribute the noise most equitably, or do we not want to introduce new people to the noise? And those things have to be decided in a regional conversation.
To report aircraft noise, visit Massport online or call the Massport Noise Complaint Line at 617-561-3333 between 7 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. on business day.